Hello and welcome to something I'm really excited about today. This is our first ever peer chat as part of our new work at Scottish Recovery Network within our Peer Recovery Hub. And I'm really, really pleased today. I'm welcoming Ray Waddingham to us in Scotland. So Ray, welcome. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Glad to be here, having a chat with you.
Yeah, I'm so pleased that you could join us. For everybody who's listening today, Ray is somebody who I have been aware of for so many years now, and a massive influence around how I think about my own experiences with psychosis, being involved and having a voice. Ray, you've done so much. Rather than me introduce you, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, that's probably easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I live in Leicestershire in England. I have voices, visions, unusual beliefs, and a whole host of stuff that gets diagnosed. Well, I've been diagnosed with various things, but most recently schizophrenia. Woohoo! I'm part of the International Hearing Voices movement. So I'm chair of the English Hearing Voices Network and part of Intervoice, this international body. I am an open dialogue practitioner and trainer and a supervisor, a mum, and also do a PhD. So yeah, kind of busy most of the time.
You sound incredibly busy.
But my life is this world of mental health that I came into without really meaning to. You know, I fell into it when I was about 20 and I kind of never left. But I guess what I found is a vocation. You know, if I hadn't have entered hospital when I was a teenager, I probably would be in a different world, different life. I wouldn't go back and change all the crappy stuff that happened. I think just because I'm quite content with where I am now in my life, and it feels like I've got a purpose.
I think that's something I can relate to as well. You know, when you end up having these experiences at quite a young age and a pivotal age as you enter adulthood. And yeah, my pathway was going one way, and then I became unwell, and through choices and opportunities, I'm doing what I am today, and I can't vision doing something else at the moment because it feels so good. It has its challenges at times, but yeah, it's a way to connect with people. So today, I think we're going to have a focus on peer support groups. Are you up for having a chat about peer support groups?
Definitely.
What are they?
That's like the simplest question, but also the really hard one too. Like on the surface of it, it's just a group of people that come together around a particular shared issue. For me, a lot of the peer support groups that I've been involved in and then facilitated are hearing voices ones. So they're groups for people that have voices, visions, other sensory experiences. And it's just about coming together, sharing some of what you're going through, supporting each other, and just creating a space where it feels okay to be yourself. And there's something really powerful about that for me. There's something around it reducing that isolation and the shame, you know, this sense of there's something deeply wrong with me and I'm not worthy to be around other people. It's something around building up knowledge. You know, it's a bit subversive, really, because we're in these sort of fields where professional and academic knowledge kind of is they take up a lot of space and they've got their value. But many of us have had our experiences overwritten, obscured, reframed, interpreted in ways that don't feel so comfortable. And peer support groups allow us to find our own stories, refind our own stories and connect with that and build up our own knowledge, separate in many times to the professionalized knowledge. And a place of empowerment, I guess. It's where I learnt that I have something to offer.
That's so important isn't it? Because when you get into that situation where you feel that you don't have much of a say, or you don't, things feel outside of your control, both internally and externally, people are making decisions and choices for you to begin to get that back again is quite liberating.
Hugely. And I think when I entered the peer support groups, so the Hearing Voices groups many years ago, not saying how many, but more than a few, I didn't even feel human. Like I didn't feel that I belonged in the world.
Yeah.
And it was through connecting with others who heard voices and recognizing their awesomeness and their diversity, it allowed me to allow people to connect with me. And that's how I started to feel part of the world again. It, like, individual peer support can do that, I think, but when you've got somebody opposite you, even if they have shared experiences, it's easy to see them as better than you, you know, like more advanced, more sorted. Peer support groups, I think it's easier for it to feel a bit more horizontal, like the people in the group are in a similar place. And it just it overturns that kind of hierarchy that's there all the time, I think, if we have a paid role.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it as well, because I remember actually probably the first peer support group that I went to was a Hearing Voices group. And though I'd met people in hospital who had similar experiences, there was something about being in the group, because we're sort of maybe outside of hospital, we're slightly more together enough within ourselves to be able just to be openly and discuss things and feel that that was safe to do so, and you weren't going to be rushed back to hospital. And to hear other people talk and think, gosh, I hadn't thought of it that way. That's really insightful. I wonder if I could try that. I wonder if I could think about it that way. And
that's a huge thing, because like I spent probably about 8 months in hospital before I was discharged, and then went eventually a year or so later to a Hearing Voices group. But in hospital, I did not want to hear about coping strategies. I did not want to do the mindfulness. I just wanted to get rid of my voices. But it was in the peer support group that I started to learn strategies, because I heard other people talking about them. And it wasn't like they were being forced on me. It was like there was a buffet, and I could maybe pick something out of the buffet if I fancied it, but I didn't have to.
If you're feeling that you have to do something because it's sort of advocated or prescribed, whereas if it's something that's offered and you have a choice and other people are talking about how it works for them or not, and it's really quite interesting how the dynamics play out in that. I think I was somebody who would always rebel a little bit.
Which I very much admire. I was both rebellious and really compliant at the same time. It was on the surface of it, I was very nice, but I didn't buy into it, I guess. It just didn't feel like it'd work for me.
What persuaded you to go, or what got you across the door?
Because the first time I saw a leaflet, I was like, no, why would I want to go and talk about my voices? I've been spending a few years in hospital trying to get rid of them. And I had no conception that talking to other people that went through it, would be useful. Like, I was set up to expect the doctors and the nurses would be the ones with the expertise. And I think it was desperation. One thing that helped was reading a book about someone else's experiences, Phone at 9 Just to Say You're Alive, which was someone local to me, Linda Hart. And it was mad that I'd spent ages in hospital but not really heard about any other experiences, and not really talked about my own that much. And then I was reading this book about someone from my local area, and I just drank her experiences, and some of them were really different to mine, but there was a sense of connection still, like I could recognize bits of it. And then I think it was my third or fourth hospitalization, aliens were talking to me. I was completely overwhelmed and figured that I wouldn't survive if I kept going through this cycle of admissions, and I was desperate, and I thought, got to give it a go, really. And I didn't have high hopes for it or anything. But then the funniest thing was when I left that group, I felt massively elated. It wasn't the best group in the world, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, it was good, but I was only in my early 20s. Everyone else was like 35 plus, 40 plus, which now doesn't feel so old. But back then it was a huge difference. They weren't my peers in terms of age and where I was in my life, but I recognized so much of what they said, and I felt like for the first time I'm not on my own. That's it. So after a little time of going to it, I began to co-facilitate the group, mainly because we were offered 20 quid a session for anyone that would co-facilitate it. So we all put our hands up and we rotated. No idea what I was doing, but yeah, we kind of had some experience there. Went off and became a musician for a few years, and then saw this amazing job advertised at Mind in Camden, managing the London Hearing Voices project. And its main role was to help facilitators do the groups. So recruit new facilitators, support new groups to set up, support the existing facilitators. And so I got to develop some training for facilitators. I got to develop a peer support network, and we started off with adults, but then developed a project with children and young people, and then going into prisons and forensic units. It was this, yeah, I was there for about 7 years, and it started off as this kind of quite boundaried project, and then we just kind of expanded and ran with it. And I learned the most about facilitating, I think, through that project, because when you're trying to explain it to others and help others get into it, it really questioned a lot of what I thought I was doing as a facilitator and started to really clarify it for me. Much more than when I was actually facilitating the group originally. And I think because often when I was facilitating initially, I didn't have time to think about, well, why am I doing this? So I followed the models that I had, and we had a clinical psychologist in the group who was a great facilitator. So I kind of modeled myself on him, which is great. But now I cringe a little bit when I look back on my early facilitations, you know, just thinking that I'd got this idea that I needed to understand other people's voices, that I needed to do something. Whereas the more I've been in facilitation, the more I've realised that it's trying to hold a space.
You mentioned a bit there at the beginning when you just said that about knowing what your why was.
It's thinking about my role as a facilitator, like, because I use my lived experience whenever I work, facilitation or not. It's part of who I am and where I've come from. And it's like, how do I want to use that in the group? Why am I even in the group? Could the group just be there without me? And possibly, but I have a use in that I'm a steady point in the group, someone with my co-facilitator who will be there most weeks. And yeah, so the why is kind of, I'm there to help the group and to be useful to the group, but not to grab the group by the scruff of the neck and pull it in a certain direction.
Creating that space for people and welcoming them into that space and saying that this is a safe space to be, and it's okay to share and be a bit vulnerable.
And process. So a lot of my style as a facilitator is to speak about stuff that's going on in my head. So if I'm worrying that I'm being a bit too forward and saying too much, I might say, you know what, I'm just hearing my voice here and I feel like I'm taking up a lot of space. I'm just going to step back. You know, it's kind of showing that it's okay to not get things right as well. And thinking about how people connect with each other, because it's easy as a facilitator for everyone to connect with you and you become this centre hub. And when a group's working really well as a peer support group, it's other people are providing peer support for each other, and you're kind of less central. And that's always what I'm wanting to aim towards. And if I'm working for an organisation, I've got some quite specific extra roles, like it might be around, I'm ultimately responsible for what people end up calling safeguarding. You know, this sense of making sure the room's booked, all kinds of practical things. I think so. They're kind of like informal spaces. So often in a peer support group, we'll have a break halfway through or at the beginning or at the end where people can just chill.
Yeah.
And like for someone like me who gets really socially anxious, those bits are really challenging because I'm like, do I talk to people? Do I not? But for other people, they're much more, to talk about the favourite biscuits is a lot easier than talking about voices to start off with.
Yes. I can go along with that one as well. That's been my experience. I'll talk about anything else but that. And then in time that changed. And it felt such a relief to be able to talk about the things that were going on for me, the voices I heard, and not feel that I was raising a warning bell or anything. It was more, I just want to explore what this is and what it means to me.
And that's the key, that it can change over time, because some people, when I've been training in peer support groups, people go, well, what if people go off topic and don't talk about the voices or don't talk about the subject of the peer support group? And my kind of vibe generally is, I don't think anything's off topic. If no one's talked about voices for the entire group or visions or anything in that ballpark, I might flag it towards the end and go, so we haven't talked about this yet. We might not want to, and that's fine. But just naming it, then people can choose to carry on or not.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So it doesn't become taboo to talk about the tricky issues.
Of course,
But also that actually it's really important just to get to know each other, and these are big parts of our lives sometimes.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Often when people came on the facilitation training, they were craving like a map, a guide. How on earth do I do this facilitation thing step by step? If X happens, what do I do? And the challenge for people on the training that I was running was that we start from the values. What is this thing called peer support? Some of the values of the Hearing Voices movement, that there's no one way of understanding voices, and that everyone has a right to their own beliefs, and all these core values were the things that we spent quite a lot of time on, with the belief that if we hold these values in mind, it then becomes easier to think about how would I deal with X or Y situation. But that was so frustrating for people, I think, that I still think it's the most helpful way of teaching facilitation, because if we respect a plurality of explanations, then if someone comes to a group and, for example, believes very strongly that they have schizophrenia and that medication is the way forward and that actually other people should take medication, and someone comes to the group feeling that their voices are spirits and believes that very strongly and thinks everyone else's voices are spirits, we can respect each other's beliefs, and actually it's a really important part of the group, but we can't be talking for everyone else in the group. So it kind of gives us an understanding that we don't have to agree with one over the other, even if we might agree with spiritual or schizophrenia beliefs. Our job is to kind of respect each person's views, but also set a limit for talking about others. The other thing that I found really useful is the importance of being an imperfect facilitator.
Tell me more.
This helps me and sometimes helps others. Like, if you were the best facilitator in the world, like I've met some of them who are just fantastic, it's brilliant, but no one else in your group will necessarily feel able to step into your role and take up more power and agency within the group because you've got it sorted. You're amazing. And so from my view, at least, being slightly imperfect, messing up occasionally, apologizing, being very human, leaves space for group members to take on more responsibilities too, to help you out. Just knowing that it's okay to be yourself as a facilitator. You don't have to have it all sorted. You're there for the group, but you can be humble and have some humility with it.
Yeah. And I'm nodding my head because I can so relate to that as well. I tried to be this perfect facilitator, whether it was within a group or training or whatever. I was aiming to be this perfect. And I realised I was never going to get there because it was always well, it's something else to reach towards, and then it was something else. And really, what was wrong with being myself? And as you're saying, it helps you connect much more to the people that you're with when you are yourself, and being able to own and say, well, yeah, that wasn't so great. Okay, that's fine. Because then it allows people to feel that they can also try things, and they're not going to be held up to such high standards.
And also there's that sense that the group can help you. So with my co-facilitator, in the early days, we might spend a lot of time thinking about what do we need to do to help this group work better.
Yeah.
Something's gone on in the group, we'll spend a lot of time thinking about it. The longer I've been doing this, the more I've been really encouraging people to take it to the group and go, okay, so I think this was a really tricky week last week. How was it for you guys? What could we all do differently? Like what might make this work? And actually that's just so profound, because often we don't have group members have so much resources and ideas and wisdom that they can bring to a situation. And if we're as the facilitators thinking that it's all on us, we're kind of doing them a disservice.
That's a really good point to have as well. The point of putting yourself under that pressure, but the power and the knowledge is within that group. Bring it back, problem solve it together. Is there anything else that you would like to share, just as a closeout?
I think if people are listening to this and are moderately terrified of groups, I am terrified of groups. Like, they're the site of a lot of my trauma, my bullying, various things I've been through in my life. And yet I keep coming back to creating peer support groups. They're such a big part of my life. And I think some days groups have challenges and there can be really big things happen in them, but actually most groups are full of people that really, really want the space to be okay.
Yeah. And
there's something quite healing for me about being part of these kind of groups and just seeing that people are generally kind of awesome. If I can let my own worries down long enough to sort of be there, I think people are kind of awesome. And I hope that maybe some of the people that are listening are tempted to give it a go and have a think about setting something up.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think you were the person who got me to, well, you didn't get me to, but I heard you talk about people being awesome. And it really made me think about how I relate to people and how, let's see people's awesomeness. So thank you so much for today, Ray. And I hope people in Scotland and elsewhere who are listening to this have found it really helpful, and if you're thinking about taking up or getting more involved in a peer support group, give it a go. So as we close, Ray, if anybody wanted to find out more about you, where could they find you?
They can find the Hearing Voices Network in England at www.hearing-voices.org, or my own website, which is behindthelabel.co.uk.
Fabulous. So thank you so much for today, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, I hope so.